Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Artist Conflict Studio, where we try to manage conflicts. Today, we are diving into something that can shake even the most confident among us: receiving negative feedback. Whether it's from a boss or a colleague or an angry client or customer, receiving negative feedback feels like a gut punch, even when they are phrased as constructive criticism or areas of improvement. Still hurts. Why? Because let's be honest, nobody likes hearing that they are doing something wrong or that they could have done better. The reason is that our brains are wired to receive these kind of feedback as threat, same as physical threat, which is why our first natural instinct is often to get defensive, shut down, or maybe even convince ourselves that the other person who is sharing that feedback with us is just plain wrong. Well, today we are going to unpack why sometimes receiving feedback feels so hard and how to handle it from different sources. And most importantly, how to turn even the harshest criticism into something useful. So let's get into it. Why receiving negative feedback is so hurtful. When we receive criticism, especially if it's unexpected or if it's harsh, our brains go into fight or flight mode. It's the same reaction that we would have if you're facing a lion that was chasing us, literally like a physical threat. That's how our brains translate those kind of threats. So we might get defensive, which is the fight mode, or we may just leave the room, which is the flight mode, or we may freeze, which usually happens when we do not have either of those options. Another factor is self-image. We all like to think of ourselves as competent, smart, or capable. When someone points out a flaw, it can feel like an attack on who we are rather than what we did. And let's not forget the cultural differences and how it contributes to this issue. Some cultures value direct feedback. Think of it as most of Europe, such as Netherlands, where bluntness is seen as efficiency. So it's expected. On the other hand, other cultures like Japan often use more indirect or face-saving approaches. So how we perceive feedback can depend on what we are used to. If you grew up in a culture where people soften criticism, getting blunt feedback might feel brutal. On the flip side, if you're used to directness, when you receive a vague feedback, that may be just confusing or even frustrating. Now, let's break down handling feedback into 3 categories based on who is sharing that feedback. If it comes from someone who is a supervisor or in a supervisory role or a peer, or if it's coming from a customer or client. Let's just start with handling feedback when it comes from a supervisor. How should we approach negative feedback if it's coming from higher up? One of the major areas of conflict related to feedback is when it's downstream feedback, meaning that it's coming from a higher level in the hierarchy, such as from a supervisor. This can be specifically tough because, let's face it, it's your boss. They have power over your job. If their feedback feels unfair, vague, or overly harsh, it's easy to get frustrated or doubt yourself. And not responding properly can have consequences. It may even jeopardize one's job security. So it's specifically difficult to receive these type of feedback. Let's look into an example. Emma and Alex work together, and Emma is the supervisor. Emma says,
Hi, Alex. Can we have a quick chat about the report you submitted yesterday? Of course, Emma. What's on your mind?
Well, to be honest, this report wasn't what I was expecting. You need to do better next time.
I appreciate the feedback, Emma. Can I ask, could you help me understand what specifically didn't meet your expectations?
Sure. I think the analysis part was too short, and I was hoping for more detailed recommendation.
I see. That's really helpful to know. Would you be able to give me an example of the kind of recommendations you were looking for?
Yes, for instance, I was hoping to see some concrete next steps for the team to follow based on your data.
Got it. Thanks for clarifying. I'll revise the report and add those specific suggestions. If you're available, maybe we can review the updated version together?
Absolutely. Thanks for being open to feedback, Alex. I appreciate it.
As you hear in this conversation, the initial problem was not with the feedback that was shared. Rather, it was with the vagueness of the feedback. Or imagine you're working on a big project and your boss tells you, "This isn't what I expected. You need to do better." No details, no specifics, just that. Your first instinct is to be panicking or to become defensive. Instead of that, try to pause before reacting. Take a deep breath and ask clarifying questions to make sure that you fully understand what the concern was. For example, you can ask, "Could you help me understand what specifically needs improvement?" Or, "Can you give me an example of what you were expecting?" When we have these line of questioning, these can help clarify the issue, or sometimes it may just help the person who shared the feedback to realize that some of the things may be baseless allegations that they shared in their feedback, or maybe it was unnecessary or unnecessarily harsh. And at that point, they may just retract. In either scenario, everyone in the team wins. Just be mindful of how those questions are phrased to convey genuine curiosity as opposed to challenging their authority or being sarcastic. Remember, in most of the conflicts, the main issue is not what someone said, it's how they said it. Another solution to this problem is separate the feedback from your self-worth. One piece of criticism doesn't mean that you are bad at your job. It just means that there is room to improve, which is true for everyone. And it also shows that you are capable of delivering better results, which is actually a good thing. So ultimately, you will benefit from it. Now that we discussed handling feedback from a supervisor, let's look into how we can handle feedback from our peers. What happens if the feedback is not from someone higher up, rather it's from someone at our level, one of our peers or colleagues? Now, peer feedback is a whole different ballgame. When a colleague at the same level criticizes your work, especially if it's unsolicited, it can feel very personal. After all, they are not your boss. Who are they to judge your work, right? Let's say you are in a meeting and you are presenting a project that you have been working on really hard, and a coworker who is not even an expert in that field suddenly says, "I don't think this project was handled well." Ouch. That public criticism can really sting. What should we do here? A good approach is perspective shifting. Instead of thinking that this colleague of mine is attacking me, forget about what the interaction was. Just take that piece of advice and think, are they bringing up something that I can actually improve? And if their feedback is vague, don't be afraid to ask for specifics, politely, of course. Something like, "I'd love to understand what you mean." Or, "Can you give an example to clarify this?" And sometimes the feedback may just be unfair. What do we do then? Stay professional. Say something as simple as, I appreciate your perspective, or let's talk about after the meeting. Or if you don't want to talk about it after the meeting, you can just say, thank you. I will take that into consideration. This way, without promising that you're going to follow up later, you're showcasing your superior professional skills as someone who is always open to new ideas. Basically, you turned a potential conflict to an opportunity for the team to get to know you better and see the very professional side of you who can handle or prevent conflicts. Now, what happens if the situation is that we have a third party? Let's say there's a customer, there's a client. This situation usually is very emotional, and customer feedback can be very heated. When a client or customer is upset, their feedback is usually wrapped into intense emotions. And that emotion is not about you. Rather, it's about the situation or their frustration about the situation. Let's look at an example. We have a customer who is upset and comes in with a loud and upset voice saying that,
This is ridiculous. You guys are completely incompetent. I've been waiting for days, and still no solution.
I'm really sorry to hear that this has been so frustrating for you. I totally understand why you're upset.
Yeah, well, I've wasted so much time already. This is unacceptable.
I hear you, and I want to make sure I fully understand what's happened. Can you walk me through what you've experienced so far?
I called 3 days ago about an issue with my account. They said it would be fixed in 24 hours. Nothing happened. No updates. Nothing.
now, it's good to be empathetic, but at the same time, it's also helpful to be solution focused. So something like,
Thank you for explaining that. I'm really sorry this has taken longer than expected. Let me check your account right now and see what's going on. I'll do my best to resolve this as quickly as possible.
so that last piece is the solution that we are offering. Picture this. We have a customer who is furious about a company policy and says, this is ridiculous. You're completely incompetent. Maybe really hard to accept. But how do we approach this? Stay calm and don't take it personally. One powerful tool is active listening. Instead of jumping in with a defense, try repeating what you heard about the concern of the client. I hear that you're frustrated about this policy, and I understand why that's upsetting. This shows A, you're listening. B, if there is a misunderstanding, this is a good chance to clarify and understand what the real issue is, and also helps diffuse the tension. And sometimes an apology may be helpful, but not all apologies are the same. For example, if you don't think that there was any mistakes from your end, you can always say, I'm sorry this situation has been frustrating for you, instead of, I'm sorry about the mistake that we made. This way, you're acknowledging the feeling of the client or customer without taking the blame for something that's outside your control. By the way, we have a full episode on apology that's coming up, so stay tuned for that. Now, let's get back to our topic here. At this point, I want to offer you some practical strategy for processing feedback. So far, we have covered how we handle feedback in the moment, during the time that that feedback is given to us. But what happens afterwards? When that conversation is done, the dialogue is ended. How do you process it without dwelling on it for days? This is really critical because this can change everything from you being upset for several days to you taking advantage of an opportunity that we will discuss. In fact, you can potentially benefit from the feedback that was received, even if it's harsh, even if it's unfair. First, give yourself time before reacting. It's okay to say, I appreciate your feedback. Let me take some time to think about it and get back to you. This prevents knee-jerk reactions. In some cases, I see people overreact to a feedback before even fully comprehending it. Secondly, look for some patterns. If you're getting the same feedback from multiple people, there's probably something there to work on or something to be communicated differently. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily at fault. Sometimes it may mean that there is a systemic issue within the organization that needs to be addressed. Third, find useful part of even the harshest criticism. Like a skilled surgeon, try to dissect what is helpful from rest of the feedback. Don't throw baby with the bathwater. Even if someone's delivery was rude, was there something valid in what they pointed out? Focusing on what's useful can help you grow without taking things personally. Although it's easier said than done. And finally, build resilience. Not all feedback is accurate or fair, but learning to take it in stride is a skill that will serve you in any role you have, personally or professionally. Always look at these interactions as a skill building exercise. Because ultimately, the more we engage in challenging interactions, the more leadership skills we build. So, what did we learn today? First, difficult feedback feels hard because our brains are wired to see that as a threat. But if we take a step back and process it instead of reacting emotionally, we can actually turn feedback into something useful. Whether it's from a boss or a colleague or a customer, the key is to listen and ask clarifying questions and separate feedback from our self-worth. And hey, even the worst feedback can have a nugget of value in it if we know how to look for it. In the next episode, we are flipping the script and talking about how to share feedback, either to a colleague, to a peer, or upward feedback, which means giving feedback to your boss without being fired. Until then, thanks for listening. And remember, feedback is just information. What we do with it is what really matters. And don't forget to share your feedback about our podcast with our team. Thank you.